The silence in Dr. Roth's laboratory was broken by a soft chime from his computer. He looked up from his microscope, adjusting his glasses as the screen displayed an incoming transmission from deep space. After 30 years of searching for signs of extraterrestrial life, he had grown used to false alarms and equipment malfunctions. This time felt different, though. The signal was too organized, too purposeful to be natural. Complex mathematical patterns danced across his monitor, showing clear signs of intelligence behind their creation. Dr. Roth's hands trembled as he began recording everything. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for since they first looked up at the stars. 3 days later, the first alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit. It was massive, easily 10 times larger than anything humans had ever built. The metal hull gleamed with an otherworldly beauty, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. Dr. Roth stood in the hastily constructed meeting room at the United Nations headquarters, watching as world leaders struggled to comprehend what was happening. Commander Vorthak materialized in the center of the room through some form of advanced technology. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved with fluid grace. His eyes were large and dark, holding an expression that seemed both curious and dismissive. When he spoke, his words came through a translation device that made his voice sound mechanical and cold. "I am Commander Vorthak of the Draknari Empire," he announced to the assembled humans. "We have detected your species during our routine survey of this galactic sector. You have been classified as a Class C primitive species according to standard protocols." Dr. Roth stepped forward, his heart racing with excitement and fear. "We welcome you to Earth, Commander. This is a historic moment for our species. We have so many questions about your civilization and the galaxy beyond our world." Commander Vorthak's expression didn't change. "Your questions are irrelevant. We are here to inform you of the regulations that now govern your species. The Draknari Empire, along with our allies the Velthani Collective and the Koran Federation, maintain order throughout this galaxy. We have done so for over 10,000 of your years." The alien commander gestured with one of his 4 hands, and a holographic display appeared showing the galaxy. Vast sections were colored in different hues, representing the territories of the 3 dominant powers. Earth appeared as a tiny dot on the edge of Draknari space. "Your species shows typical primitive characteristics," Vorthak continued. "You are violent, territorial, short-lived, and bound to a single world. Our scientists estimate it will take your people at least 500 standard years to develop basic interstellar travel capabilities, assuming you do not destroy yourselves first." Dr. Roth felt his excitement turning to confusion and anger. "Primitive? We've developed nuclear technology, spaceflight, global communications. We've split the atom and begun to understand the fundamental forces of the universe." "Child's play," Vorthak replied dismissively. "Every species discovers these basic principles eventually. What matters is wisdom, restraint, and the ability to integrate peacefully into galactic society. Your species has demonstrated none of these qualities." The alien commander's words stung, but Dr. Roth pressed on. "Then help us learn. Share your knowledge with us. We could contribute to galactic civilization in ways you might not expect." "Impossible," Vorthak said firmly. "The galactic accords are clear. Primitive species must remain confined to their home systems until they achieve technological maturity. Any attempt to leave your solar system will result in immediate quarantine enforcement. This is for the protection of both your species and established civilization." President Martinez of the Global Union spoke up. "You're placing us under house arrest for crimes we haven't committed. This is unjust." Commander Vorthak's large eyes showed what might have been amusement. "Justice is a concept that requires wisdom to understand. Your species lacks the perspective necessary to participate in galactic affairs. Consider this protection rather than punishment. What gives you the right to make that decision for us?" Dr. Roth demanded. "Superior technology, superior wisdom, and superior organization," Vorthak replied. "The 3 galactic powers have maintained peace and order for millennia. We will not allow a single primitive species to disrupt that balance." The meeting continued for hours, but the outcome never changed. Commander Vorthik explained that a monitoring station would be established on Pluto, staffed by junior researchers who would file reports every few decades. Humanity would be observed but not contacted unless they violated the quarantine restrictions. "When will we be considered ready for galactic society?" Dr. Roth asked as the meeting drew to a close. "When you have eliminated warfare, unified your government, developed sustainable technology, and demonstrated emotional maturity," Vorthik answered. "Most species require between 500 and 1,000 years to achieve these benchmarks." After the alien commander departed, Dr. Roth remained in the empty meeting room, staring at the spot where the holographic galaxy had appeared. The other world leaders had left to address their nations, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Everything he had dreamed about first contact had been wrong. Instead of enlightenment and partnership, humanity had been dismissed as children unworthy of adult conversations. They were prisoners in their own solar system, watched by guards who considered them barely worthy of attention. The vast universe that had once seemed full of possibilities now felt like a cage, but as Dr. Roth sat in the darkness, a different emotion began to replace his despair. The aliens had made one crucial mistake in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that being dismissed would discourage human ambition. Instead, it had done something far more dangerous. It had given humanity a goal over the following weeks. As news of the alien contact spread across Earth, something unprecedented began to happen. The revelation that humans were considered primitive by galactic standards didn't crush their spirit. Instead, it unified them in ways that centuries of conflict had failed to achieve. Nations that had been enemies for generations suddenly found common ground. If aliens viewed humanity as a single primitive species, then perhaps it was time for humans to prove them wrong by actually becoming one. The Solar Liberation Project was born not from government mandate, but from a shared human desire to show the galaxy exactly what their species could accomplish when properly motivated. Dr. Roth became one of the project's founding members, dedicating his life to studying every scrap of information gathered from the brief alien contact. He knew that somewhere in those energy readings and technological signatures lay the keys to human freedom. The aliens had called humanity primitive, violent, and short-sighted. They were about to discover that humans had one trait that no galactic survey could measure. When told something was impossible, humans had an annoying habit of proving the universe wrong. 50 years had passed since first contact, and junior researcher Kelphus was thoroughly bored with his assignment. The monitoring station on Pluto was considered a dead-end posting within the Drachnary Empire, suitable only for recent graduates who needed to build experience before receiving more important duties. Watching primitive humans was about as exciting as observing the growth patterns of simple bacteria. Kelphus reviewed his latest report with practiced indifference. The humans had developed chemical rockets and achieved basic orbital flight exactly as predicted by the initial assessment models. Their progress fell well within established parameters for primitive species, showing no signs of unexpected advancement or creativity. He filed the report with minimal commentary and returned to his studies of advanced xenobiology. What Kelphus failed to notice was the most significant change in human civilization since the development of agriculture. Hidden beneath the surface of routine technological progress, humanity was undergoing a transformation that would have terrified the galactic powers if they had bothered to look closely. Dr. Emma Rodriguez stood in the concealed laboratory beneath the ice fields of Europa, watching her team work on technologies that officially didn't exist. The facility was one of dozens scattered throughout the outer solar system, each dedicated to solving pieces of an impossible puzzle. How do you build faster than light travel when you're not supposed to understand the basic principles involved? The energy signature analysis is complete, announced Dr. Park from his workstation. I've isolated 17 distinct technological markers from the alien ship's emission patterns. Most follow conventional physics, But there are three anomalies that suggest they're using principles we haven't discovered yet. Emma nodded, reviewing the data on her screen. The brief alien contact had provided humanity with more information than the Drachneri realized. Every scan, every energy reading, every electromagnetic pulse had been recorded and analyzed by the brightest minds on Earth. Slowly, piece by piece, they were reverse engineering an understanding of galactic technology. What about the gravity? Manipulation systems? She asked. That's where it gets interesting, Dr. Park replied, his excitement evident despite the serious nature of their work. Their approach to FTL travel relies on bending space-time, which requires enormous amounts of energy. But I've been thinking about this problem differently, Emma raised an eyebrow. Differently how? What if we don't bend space-time at all? What if we phase partially out of normal reality instead? Quantum entanglement theory suggests that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously. If we could extend that principle to an entire spacecraft, the implications hit Emma immediately. We wouldn't be moving through space at all. We'd be moving through the quantum foam that underlies reality itself. Exactly. And the beautiful part is that their sensors wouldn't be able to detect it properly. They're looking for space-time distortions, not quantum phase transitions. While Dr. Park worked on revolutionary propulsion systems, Agent Mills had been developing something equally important but far more subtle. Deep in a facility hidden within the asteroid belt, he was establishing humanity's first extrasolar intelligence network. The quantum communicators were based on entangled particle pairs, allowing instantaneous communication across any distance. The aliens used similar technology for their own communications, but human quantum signals were structured completely differently. Where alien communications followed established galactic protocols, human signals used chaotic patterns that look like random noise to conventional monitoring systems. Mills activated the latest communication node and watched as it connected to similar devices hidden throughout nearby star systems. Robotic probes, launched in secret and traveling at sublight speeds to avoid detection, had been establishing these nodes for decades. Now humanity had eyes and ears in 17 different solar systems, gathering intelligence on a galactic civilization that didn't know it was being watched. The information flowing back to Earth was staggering. Detailed maps of trade routes, military installations, political structures, and technological capabilities. Humanity was learning more about galactic civilization every day, while the galactic powers knew essentially nothing about what humans were really doing. Back on Earth, the transformation was even more dramatic. The knowledge that humanity was imprisoned had accomplished what no war or crisis had ever managed. It had given the species a common purpose that transcended all previous divisions. The last national military had been disbanded 5 years earlier, with all personnel and equipment transferred to the Solar Defense Force. Resources that had once been wasted on conflicts between human nations were now focused entirely on the goal of breaking free from alien restrictions, President Chun addressed the Global Assembly from the unified capital in Geneva. Today marks the completion of our orbital manufacturing networks, she announced to representatives from every region of Earth. Our production capacity now exceeds the combined industrial output of our species at the time of first contact by a factor of 100. The numbers were staggering, but they only told part of the story. Humanity had not just industrialized space, they had revolutionized their entire approach to technology. Faced with the need to compete with civilizations thousands of years more advanced, humans had abandoned conventional thinking entirely. Dr. Foster's neural interface project was perhaps the most ambitious of all. If humans were going to compete with species that had millennia of experience, they needed to accelerate their own learning and problem-solving capabilities. The neural enhancement networks allowed teams of scientists to share knowledge and intuition directly, creating collective intelligence that exceeded the sum of its parts. We're not trying to match their accumulated knowledge, Dr. Foster explained to the Research Council. We're trying to exceed their rate of discovery. If we can innovate faster than they can adapt, their head start becomes irrelevant. The results we're already showing. Human scientists were making breakthrough discoveries at a rate that would have been impossible for any individual working alone. Technologies that should have taken centuries to develop were being created in decades. Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards of the outer system, the first generation of human interstellar vessels neared completion. These ships bore no resemblance to anything in the galactic databases. Where alien vessels were built for reliability and standardization, human ships were designed for adaptability and surprise. The quantum phase drives were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the massive energy requirements of conventional FTL systems, these ships could slip between dimensions using minimal power. They were invisible to standard sensors, untraceable by conventional means, and capable of appearing anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Commander, Lewis inspected the lead vessel from the observation deck of the orbital shipyard. The ship was sleek and purposeful, built with technologies that didn't officially exist by a species that was supposedly confined to its home system. "How long until the fleet is ready?" he asked the chief engineer. 6 months for the first squadron, 2 years for the full complement, came the reply. "We're building them as fast as we can without attracting attention from the monitoring station." Lewis nodded. The Draknari researchers on Pluto continued to file their routine reports, completely unaware that humanity had developed the capability to travel to any point in the galaxy. The aliens' greatest weakness was their assumption that primitive species would remain primitive. As he watched the final hull sections being installed on humanity's first starship, Lewis couldn't help but smile. The galactic powers had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had judged humans based on their current capabilities rather than their potential for growth. That mistake was about to cost them everything they thought they knew about how the galaxy worked. Humanity was no longer the primitive species that had been discovered 50 years ago. They had become something entirely new, and they were almost ready to introduce themselves to their neighbors. The revolution had been silent, but it wouldn't stay that way much longer. Fleet Commander Gorvak reviewed the tactical display with satisfaction as his 12 warships approached the human solar system. The Koran Federation had decided it was time to establish mining rights in this backwater region, and the primitive humans would need to be reminded of their place in the galactic order. The operation was so routine that Gorvak had assigned it to junior officers as a training exercise. Primitive species typically surrendered immediately when faced with superior firepower, making these missions ideal for teaching young commanders about proper intimidation techniques. The humans would see the massive Koran warships, realize their hopeless situation, and submit to Federation authority within hours. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the third planet," reported his communications officer. "Put it through," Gorvak ordered, settling back in his command chair. He expected to hear desperate pleas for mercy or perhaps confused questions about Koran intentions. Instead, he heard something that caught him completely off guard. "This is Captain Lewis of the Earth defense ship Defiance. Representing the Solar Defense Force," came a calm, professional voice. "You have entered human territorial space without authorization. Please state your intentions." Gorvak blinked in surprise. The human was speaking as if he had some authority in this situation, as if his tiny primitive species could somehow challenge the might of the Koran Federation. It was almost amusing. "I am Fleet Commander Gorvak of the Koran Federation," he replied, his voice carrying the tone he used for addressing unruly children. "We are here to establish mining operations in this system. Your species will provide workers and support as required under standard colonial protocols." There was a brief pause before Captain Lewis responded. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Commander. Humans decline your offer. We suggest you leave our space immediately." Now Gorvak was genuinely amused. He looked around his bridge at his officers, all of whom were trying not to laugh at the primitive human's audacity. A species that barely had chemical rockets was attempting to give orders to one of the galaxy's premier military forces. "Perhaps you don't understand the situation," Gorvak said, his tone becoming more condescending. "We are the Koran Federation. We have conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed dozens of species into our empire. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships, and your entire planet could be destroyed with a single command from me. We understand perfectly, Commander, Captain Lewis replied. We simply choose not to comply. This is human space, and uninvited guests are not welcome. Gorvak decided it was time for a demonstration. These humans clearly needed to see the overwhelming difference in power between their primitive technology and advanced Koran weapons. He ordered his fleet to target a large asteroid in the outer system, one that appeared to be uninhabited, but would provide an impressive display of destruction. Observe carefully, humans, he broadcast on all frequencies. This is what happens to those who defy the Koran Federation. The flagship's main plasma cannon charged with a deep humming sound that resonated through the ship's hull. The weapon fired, sending a brilliant beam of superheated energy across space to strike the targeted asteroid. The massive rock vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but glowing particles that dispersed into the void. Your turn, Gorvak announced. Smugly, show us what your primitive species can do. What happened next would haunt Gorvak for the rest of his life. The human ship, which had been invisible to Koran sensors until that moment, suddenly appeared directly beside his flagship. It was sleek and angular, built with materials and design principles that looked completely alien despite coming from a supposedly primitive species. Thank you for the demonstration, Commander, Captain Lewis said politely. Please allow us to return the favor. The human ship's weapon fired without any of the charging sequences or energy buildup that Koran technology required. There was simply a brief flash of light, and then Gorvak's flagship was cut cleanly in half. The particle beam had sliced through their shields as if they didn't exist. Carving through advanced Koran armor like it was made of paper, Gorvak found himself floating in an emergency pod, watching in horror as his mighty warship broke apart. Around him, the human weapon was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It had cut through his ship's defenses without triggering a single alarm or defensive system. All ships, open fire, he screamed into his communicator. Destroy that human vessel immediately. The remaining 11 Koran warships turned their weapons on the human ship, unleashing enough firepower to level a small city. Plasma cannons, missile systems, and energy projectors all fired simultaneously, creating a web of destruction that should have vaporized any target. The human ship simply wasn't there when the weapons arrived. It had vanished again, becoming invisible to Koran sensors and weapon systems. For several minutes, the Koran fleet fired at empty space while their target moved undetected among them. The human ship reappeared behind the second largest Koran vessel, another brief flash, another warship cut in half. The pattern repeated, with mechanical precision as Captain Lewis methodically disabled ship after ship. The human vessel would appear, fire once, and vanish before retaliation was possible. What kind of technology is this? Gorvak demanded of his science officer, who was frantically scanning the human ship whenever it became visible. I don't know, sir, came the terrified response. Their energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's as if they're using completely different physical principles than the rest of galactic civilization. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 4 minutes. When it was over, 11 Koran warships were either destroyed or disabled beyond repair. Only Gorvak's emergency pod and one heavily damaged vessel remained functional. The human ship appeared one final time, positioned directly in front of the surviving Koran destroyer. Commander Gorvak, Captain Lewis said, his voice still perfectly calm and professional, you are free to leave our space. Please inform your superiors that humans have declined their offer of colonial status. Any further incursions into our territory will be met with appropriate force. The surviving Koran ship limped away from human space, its crew traumatized and its commander humiliated. Gorvak spent the entire journey back to Federation space, trying to understand what had happened. How had a primitive species developed technology that could defeat advanced Koran warships so easily? When his report reached the Federation High Command, it was met with disbelief and suspicion. Primitive species didn't possess weapons capable of cutting through Koran shields. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond their technological capabilities. You're claiming that humans have developed FTL capability and advanced energy weapons? Demanded Fleet Admiral Korath during the inquiry. Species that were classified as primitive just 50 years ago? I saw it with my own eyes, Gorvik insisted. Their ship appeared and disappeared at will. Our sensors couldn't track it, our weapons couldn't hit it, and their weapon cut through our strongest shields like they weren't even there. The Admiral's expression suggested he thought Gorvik was either lying or suffering from combat stress. Perhaps there was some kind of technical malfunction with your ships. Primitive humans simply don't have access to that level of technology. Similar reactions occurred when news of the incident spread through galactic intelligence networks. The Draknari Empire dismissed it as equipment failure or exaggeration. The Velthani Collective assumed it was some kind of elaborate deception. None of the galactic powers could accept that their fundamental assumptions about human capabilities might be wrong. Only a few intelligence analysts took the reports seriously, but their warnings were buried in bureaucratic procedures and filed away as low-priority concerns. The established powers of the galaxy had spent millennia believing in their own superiority, and a single military defeat wasn't enough to shake that confidence. Back in human space, Captain Lewis docked his ship at the hidden shipyard where it had been constructed. The successful engagement had proven that human technology could compete with anything the galaxy had to offer, but it had also revealed humanity's hand earlier than planned. They'll be more careful next time, Lewis told Admiral Thompson during his debriefing. The element of surprise won't work twice. Then we'll have to be more creative, Thompson replied. Humans have always been good at adapting to new situations. If they want to play games with us, they're about to learn that we're very good at changing the rules. The brief battle had accomplished more than just military victory. It had announced to the galaxy that humanity was no longer the primitive species that could be dismissed and ignored. They had become players in the galactic community. Whether the established powers wanted to acknowledge it or not, the question now was how the galaxy would respond to this new reality, and whether humanity was prepared for the consequences of their emergence onto the interstellar stage. Psi Lord Nethys floated in the meditation chamber of his flagship, surrounded by the soft glow of psionic amplifiers that enhanced his already considerable mental abilities. The Velthani Collective had decided that humanity posed too great a threat to be allowed to develop independently, and psychological integration was their preferred method of bringing troublesome species into compliance. The operation was based on millennia of experience. The Velthani had successfully pacified over 40 species using psychic domination, converting potential enemies into willing servants of the collective. Humans would be no different despite their surprising technological advancement. Mental conditioning was far more reliable than military conquest, and it left the subject species grateful for their enlightenment. Begin the approach vector, Nethys commanded his bridge crew through their mental link. All Psi ships are to maintain formation and prepare for synchronized mind touch with the human population centers. The Velthani fleet moved through space. Like a school of luminous fish, their bioorganic ships pulsing with psychic energy. Each vessel was grown rather than built, created from living materials that could channel and amplify the mental powers of their crews. Against any normal species, they represented an unstoppable force of mental domination. Dr. Foster monitored the approaching alien fleet from the Neural Defense Command Center hidden beneath the mountains of Tibet. The facility was one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets, housing the research project that had consumed her life for the past 20 years. When other scientists had focused on weapons and starships, she had prepared for a different kind of warfare. Psychic field strength is increasing, reported one of her technicians. They're beginning preliminary mind scans of the outer colonies. Dr. Foster activated the Global Defense Network with a series of mental commands transmitted through her neural interface. Around the world, specially trained humans entered the quantum-entangled meditation pods that would link their minds in ways the Velthani had never encountered before. Remember your training, she broadcast to the thousands of volunteers who formed humanity's psychic defense force. Don't try to resist their mental intrusion. Instead, embrace it and reflect it back to them amplified. Let them feel what it's like to have their own domination techniques turned against them. The Velthani Psi ships entered Earth's orbit and began broadcasting their mental conditioning fields. The psychic waves that emanated from their vessels were designed to pacify resistance, suppress independent thought, and create willing submission to collective authority. Every previous species had succumbed within hours of exposure. Instead, the aliens encountered something that shouldn't have been possible. Human minds didn't just resist the psychic assault, they weaponized it. The mental domination fields were absorbed, transformed, and reflected back at their sources with devastating effect. Psi Lord Nethys screamed as his own psychic weapon tore through his consciousness. The sensation was like having every thought he had ever used to dominate others turned against him simultaneously. Across the Velthani fleet, similar scenes played out as crew members collapsed under the feedback from their own mental attacks. What is happening? Nethys gasped, blood flowing from his nose as he struggled to maintain consciousness. How are they doing this? His science officer was barely functional, her mind reeling from the psychic backlash. They're using our own techniques against us, she managed to whisper, but modified somehow, enhanced beyond anything we've ever encountered. Dr. Foster felt the alien mind struggling against her neural network like insects caught in a web. The Velthani had based their entire civilization on the assumption that they were the galaxy's premier psychic species, but they had never encountered minds trained in what she called psionic aikido. Their mental defenses are primitive, she observed to her team. They rely entirely on overwhelming power rather than finesse or adaptability. They've never had to defend against their own weapons being turned back on them. The feedback loop continued to intensify as more human minds joined the defense network. Each new connection amplified the reflected psychic energy, creating a cascade effect that grew beyond the Velthani's ability to control or contain. Lord Nethys, his tactical officer called out desperately, we must retreat immediately. The psychic feedback is causing permanent damage to our crews. We're losing consciousness across the entire fleet. Nethys tried to maintain the mental assault, but his own psychic abilities were being systematically destroyed by the reflection of his domination techniques. For the first time in Velthani history, they had encountered minds that could not only resist their control but could actually damage them through their resistance. Full retreat, he ordered, his voice broken and defeated. Emergency jump to deep space. Break all contact with the human minds immediately. The Velthani fleet fled. From human space in complete disorder, their crews traumatized and their confidence shattered. Behind them, they left a human species that had proven immune to the galaxy's most feared form of mental domination. While the Velthani recovered from their devastating defeat, humanity was implementing the next phase of their emergence onto the galactic stage. The quantum phase drive ships that had been hidden throughout the solar system began their most ambitious mission yet. Admiral Thompson stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching as dozens of red dots appeared on the strategic display. Each dot represented a human ship that had successfully reached a target system using their undetectable faster-than-light technology. All ships report successful arrival at their designated coordinates, announced the communications officer. Operation Lighthouse is ready to commence. Thompson nodded grimly. The operation would announce humanity's true capabilities to the entire galaxy, but it would also make them enemies of every established power. There would be no going back after this moment. Begin simultaneous strikes on all targets, he ordered. Disable but do not destroy. We want to send a message, not start a genocide. Across 17 different star systems, human ships appeared without warning at military installations that were supposed to be secret and impregnable. The attacks were precisely coordinated, hitting shipyards, command centers, and weapons platforms. With surgical strikes that crippled but didn't annihilate on the Drachnary fortress world of Kelthera, Commander Vorthak watched in horror as human ships, materialized inside his defensive perimeter and systematically destroyed every weapon system. In the installation, the attackers used the same impossible technology that made them invisible to sensors and immune to retaliation. How did they find this base? He demanded of his intelligence staff. The location is classified at the highest levels. Only the Empire's most trusted commanders know these coordinates. Similar scenes played out across Corran Federation space, as human ships struck military targets that had never been attacked in over 1,000 years. The precision of the assaults revealed that humanity possessed detailed intelligence about galactic military capabilities and installations. They know everything about us, Fleet Admiral Korath realized as reports flooded in from across Federation territory. Somehow, these primitive humans have been gathering intelligence on our military structure for years without us detecting their presence. The third target of Operation Lighthouse was Velthani Space, where human ships appeared at psionic training centers and mind control facilities. The attacks were particularly devastating because the Velthani had never developed conventional defenses, relying entirely on their psychic abilities to protect their installations. Master Controller Zephy's watched from his command ship as human vessels systematically destroyed the collective's most important psychic amplification arrays. Without these installations, the Velthani would be unable to maintain mental control over their subject species. Contact the Draknarian Corran immediately, he ordered his subordinates. Humanity has become a threat to all three galactic powers. We must put aside our differences and work together to contain this menace. The simultaneous attacks lasted less than an hour, but their impact resonated throughout galactic civilization. In 60 minutes, humanity had demonstrated that they could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning or effective resistance. More importantly, they had shown remarkable restraint by disabling rather than destroying their targets. Back on Earth, President Chun addressed the planet from the Global Assembly Chambers. Today, humanity has announced its presence on the galactic stage, she declared to a world that was both proud and terrified of what they had accomplished. We have shown that we will not be confined, controlled, or dismissed by anyone. The message was broadcast throughout the galaxy using the same quantum communication networks that had made Operation Lighthouse possible. For the first time, humanity spoke directly to the hundreds of subject species that lived under the rule of the three galactic powers. We extend our hand in friendship to all species that desire freedom and equality, Chun continued. Humanity stands ready to support any people who choose to determine their own destiny rather than submit to the will of others. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate a new reality. The primitive species that had been dismissed and ignored for 50 years had become a major power capable of challenging the established order. The question now was whether the old powers would accept this new reality or attempt to destroy humanity before it could grow even stronger. In the depths of space, the fleets of three galactic empires began moving toward human territory. The greatest military force in galactic history was assembling for what they believed would be the final battle against upstart humanity. They had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they were first dismissed as primitive. The real war was about to begin. Emperor Shakthran stood before the assembled war council in the great hall of the Draknari capital world, his four arms gesturing emphatically as he addressed the greatest gathering of military leaders in galactic history. Representatives from the Draknari Empire, Corran Federation, and Velthani Collective had put aside centuries of rivalry to face what they saw as an existential threat to their way of life. The humans have made themselves our enemy, the Emperor declared, his voice carrying across the vast chamber to reach delegates from dozens of worlds. Their unprovoked attacks on our installations cannot go unanswered. They must be taught that there are consequences for challenging the established order. Fleet Admiral Korath of the Corran Federation nodded his agreement. My forces have been humiliated by these primitives. The Federation's honor demands satisfaction. We will not rest until their homeworld is reduced to ash and their species scattered to the void. Master Controller Zephyr spoke for the Velthani Collective. his words carrying the weight of the species' collective consciousness. Their resistance to mental conditioning makes them dangerous to all civilized peoples. They must be eliminated before their rebellion spreads to other subject species. The Alliance fleet that assembled in the neutral zone between galactic powers was truly magnificent in its scale and destructive potential. Over 10,000 warships from 3 different civilizations, representing the accumulated military might of species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. No force in recorded history had ever faced such overwhelming opposition. The fleet included the Drachnary Empire's most advanced dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire planets. The Corran Federation contributed their legendary battle cruisers, ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds and never known defeat. The Velthani Collective provided their bioorganic vessels, living ships that could channel the combined psychic power of their crews into devastating mental attacks. As the Armada prepared to depart for human space, Emperor Shakthrin made one final broadcast to the entire galaxy. His message was meant to demonstrate the futility of resistance and discourage any other species from following humanity's example. Let all who dwell among the stars witness what befalls those who defy the natural order, he proclaimed. The humans will serve as an example to any species foolish enough to believe they can challenge their betters. No world will be spared, no ship will escape, no human will survive to spread their poison of rebellion. The broadcast reached every inhabited system in the galaxy, including Earth. President Chun watched the alien emperor's threats from the emergency command center, buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Around her, the leaders of humanity prepared for what might be their species' final hours. Intelligence estimates place their fleet size at over 10,000 vessels, reported Admiral Thompson. Our entire space navy consists of fewer than 300 ships. The numerical disadvantage is overwhelming. Chen nodded calmly, though her heart was racing with fear and determination. Numbers aren't everything, Admiral. We've proven that before. What's the status of Operation Freedom? All preparations are complete, replied Agent Mills. Our people are in position throughout their territories. They're waiting for your signal. Instead of mobilizing humanity's small fleet for a hopeless direct confrontation, Chen had authorized the most ambitious intelligence operation in human history. For months, human agents using quantum phase technology had been infiltrating the territories of all 3 galactic powers, making contact with subject species and preparing them for this moment. Open a channel to the entire galaxy, Chun ordered. It's time to give them our response. The transmission that followed would be remembered as one of the most important communications in galactic history. Instead of addressing the 3 galactic powers, President Chun spoke directly to their subjects, the hundreds of species that had lived under alien rule for centuries. People of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying to every inhabited world through the quantum communication network. You have heard the threats of those who claim to rule over you. They speak of maintaining order, but what they really mean is maintaining their power over others. The message reached the industrial worlds of the Corran Federation, where species that had been conquered generations ago labored in factories and mines for their overlords. It reached the Drachnary Empire's agricultural planets, where entire civilizations had been reduced to farming colonies. It reached the Velthani Collective's client worlds, where independent thought had been suppressed through generations of mental conditioning. We offer you a choice, Chun continued. You can continue to accept the rule of those who see you as inferior, or you can join us in creating a galaxy where all species are equal. Humanity extends its hand in friendship to any people brave enough to claim their freedom. What happened next surprised even Chun's most optimistic projections. Across the galaxy, subject species that had been silent for centuries suddenly found their voices. The rebellion that erupted was unlike anything the galactic powers had ever faced. On the Corran mining world of Turthos, the native population seized control of their industrial facilities and declared independence. Similar uprisings occurred on dozens of other worlds as species that had been conquered generations ago remembered what freedom felt like. The Draknari Empire faced revolts on over 50 agricultural worlds simultaneously as farming colonies refused to continue shipping food to their imperial overlords. The loss of these resources would cripple the Empire's ability to maintain its vast military forces. Most dramatically, the Velthani Collective discovered that their psychic control was failing across their entire territory. The mental conditioning that had kept subject species compliant was breaking down as beings who had forgotten how to think independently began to remember their suppressed identities. Human advisors appeared on rebel worlds throughout the galaxy, providing advanced weapons, tactical support, and the quantum communication technology that allowed the various uprisings to coordinate their efforts. The galaxy's subject species weren't just rebelling randomly, they were executing a carefully planned revolution. How is this possible? Emperor Shakthren demanded as reports of rebellion flooded in from across Draknari space. These species have been pacified for centuries. They don't have the organization or resources for coordinated resistance. The humans, replied his intelligence minister grimly. They've been planning this for years. Our monitoring stations never detected. They're agents, but they've been infiltrating our territories and organizing the subject species. Fleet Admiral Korath faced similar chaos as Koran military bases found themselves cut off from supply lines and surrounded by hostile populations. We need to return immediately to restore order in our own territories, he announced to the Alliance Command. We can't attack the humans while our own empires are collapsing. Master Controller Zephes was dealing with the worst crisis in Velthani history. Without their psychic domination abilities, the collective was losing control of species they had ruled for millennia. The mental conditioning is failing everywhere, he reported. Our entire civilization is based on psychological control, and somehow the humans have found a way to break it. The Great Alliance fleet, assembled to crush humanity once and for all, began to fracture as each power recalled their ships to deal with emergencies in their own territories. The largest military force in galactic history was falling apart before it could even reach human space. Emperor Shakthren made one final attempt to salvage the situation. If we crush the humans quickly, the rebellions will collapse without their support, he argued. We must press forward with the attack regardless of the chaos in our territories. But it was too late. The alliance was breaking apart as mutual mistrust and competing priorities overcame their shared desire to destroy humanity. Each power needed their fleets to maintain control over their own territories, and none were willing to sacrifice their forces for their allies' benefit. 10 years later, Ambassador Torres walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the new galactic capital built in neutral space between the territories of dozens of independent species. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with sections designed by over 300 different civilizations working together as equals. The Treaty of Luna had established the new galactic order after months of negotiations between humanity and the former galactic powers. The three empires still existed, but as members of a larger community rather than as absolute rulers. Their territories had been reduced to their original homeworlds and a few loyal colonies, while hundreds of former subject species had claimed their independence. The Draknari delegation is requesting increased trade privileges, reported Torres' aide as they walked past a section where alien scientists from dozens of species worked together on joint research projects. Schedule a meeting for next week, Torres replied. But remind them that trade agreements require approval from the Galactic Assembly. They can't simply impose their will on other species anymore. The transformation had been remarkable. The Draknari had adapted to their new circumstances by becoming the galaxy's premier scientific and engineering consultants. Their advanced technology was still valuable, but now they had to earn their profits through fair exchange rather than imperial conquest. The Koran Federation had evolved into an elite peacekeeping force, using their military expertise to resolve conflicts between species rather than to conquer new territories. Their warrior culture had found new purpose in protecting the weak rather than exploiting them. The Velthani collective had perhaps changed the most dramatically. Free from their role as galactic overlords, they had discovered that their psychic abilities were far more powerful when used for healing and communication rather than domination. They had become the galaxy's counselors and mediators, helping species overcome the trauma of centuries of oppression. At the center of it all, humanity served as the catalyst that had made the transformation possible. They provided the advanced technology that allowed former subject species to defend their independence, the communication networks that kept the galactic community connected, and the diplomatic expertise that helped resolve conflicts peacefully. Torres paused at the great viewing window that looked out over the traffic lanes surrounding Unity Station. Ships from hundreds of different species moved through space in orderly patterns, carrying trade goods, diplomatic messages, and cultural exchanges between worlds that had been enemies just a decade earlier. Hard to believe it all started with 3 alien empires dismissing us as primitives, she mused to her aide. They made one crucial mistake in their assessment, the aide replied with a smile. They assumed that being primitive meant we would stay that way. They never considered that humans might be primitive in a different way than other species. Torres nodded, remembering the words that had become unofficial motto of the human diplomatic corps. The galactic powers had been right about humanity, being primitive, but they had completely misunderstood what that meant. Humans were primitive in the sense that they had no respect for established hierarchies, no acceptance of permanent limitations, and no willingness to accept that things had to remain the way they had always been. When told that something was impossible, humans took it as a personal challenge rather than a statement of fact. The galaxy had learned that there was a difference between being primitive and being inferior. Humanity had been both when the aliens first arrived, but they had only remained one of them. And that difference had changed everything. Now the galaxy was learning what it meant to live in a universe where the impossible was just another problem, to be solved by people too stubborn to accept defeat.